Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about progress of the world's biggest battery, Model 3 production issues, fast around the world travel, and the Hunter Valley. So, Alex, did you see that the world's biggest battery being constructed in South Australia by Tesla is halfway through its construction?
Well, that's pretty much what you'd expect, wouldn't it?
Yes, with an operation deadline of December 1st.
Yep. And I'm sure that, honestly, I'm sure that Elon wouldn't have made that promise unless he could back it up. Or else it would be a very expensive promise to make.
Well, you say that, but he has a habit of making claims that, while they don't fall necessarily drastically short, they always seem to fall a little bit short. So I wonder whether he will in fact make it by December 1st.
Well, isn't there a lot of incentive to make it by December 1st? Because if he doesn't, he's got to provide it for free. That's my understanding of the deal.
Huge, absolutely. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can just click your fingers and make it happen. Like, it's a pretty tight deadline.
Yeah, it is. I would assume that he's probably going to finish before the deadline. That would be my assumption. Just because of, what the deadline is. Also, it's a pretty vague claim, though, isn't it? That they will have the battery by that point. I mean, they could make the battery and still have components missing on it.
Yeah, I feel like that...
It's not going to be necessarily operational at that point.
Yeah, but that's, what the restriction is that the government put in place sort of thing. But I feel like there'll be some weaseling somewhere. And it might not actually be... Like, they might be claimed that it's operational, but there might have to be tests and things that have to be done so it won't actually be operating sort of thing, something like that.
Yeah.
But still, yeah, you're right. It'll probably be in the ballpark, which is crazy for what it is.
Well, look, it is, but I mean...
It's interesting... that a state government no less, has been able to 1 year after major blackouts be able to, come up with a scheme like this and almost have it implemented in the space of like 12 months.
It is actually really interesting, especially considering what's also happening in Australia at the moment, where all of our natural gases are being exported to other countries to the point where our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, is concerned about the fact that there will not be enough natural gas to fire the power production plants that are currently in place to provide Australia with the energy it needs until its renewable energy production plants are able to commence and bear that load. I'm not sure if you've kind of heard anything about that, but my understanding is we're almost at the point where Malcolm Turnbull has to ask our natural gas miners in Australia to hold off exporting and actually put a government ban on exporting the gas because we may have a shortage here.
No, I wasn't aware of that one.
Yeah, well, that's as far as I'm aware the situation. So he's basically made the threat, and he probably won't actually have to go through with putting any laws in place, but. The threat basically is that there will be export restrictions if these gas companies don't start supplying the Australian power plants first above their international exports. The reason obviously is the international companies pay, or the international buyers pay a lot more than the Australian buyers do. And I was reading an article. I don't remember exactly where it was from, but basically what they were saying is. Australia is actually in danger of facing blackouts across all the country, or across large parts of the country if we don't do anything about this energy problem. And what the article was also saying as well is it's the government's fault because they should have seen this coming from a mile away. They should have had way better renewable energy systems in place by now. And what the government's actually also considering doing is keeping old and very polluting coal power plants in play for another few years, just so that they can keep Australia supplied with energy.
It is very disappointing, isn't it?
No, it's ridiculous. And also as well, apparently Australia pays a lot more than the rest of the developed world for energy, just because of these inefficiencies that exist.
Yeah, and, there's been so many stories over the last little while that not only, in terms of greenhouse emissions and that, but it's actually hitting, people financially, and they're struggling a bit, and then, PM and that just sits down with the power companies to try and get them better deals. Like, that is the extent of the action that's really happened.
Yeah, it is.
And like you say, potential trade embargoes and that to make sure that gas is supplied to these power plants. Like, it's really backwards thinking. It's like doing the barest minimum to keep the status quo, which is not good anyway, and is just another example of Australian infrastructure that is insufficient at the moment. Whereas you get a state government that does something so substantial in such a short amount of time. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, good on South Australia. I hope we followed their lead at some point, though.
Well, my understanding is there are renewable energy projects in place, but they've kind of come in so late, and they may not even be sufficient at the moment based on what is currently in progress, that we've just ended up way behind the rest of the world, paying a lot more than we should for energy for no valid reason. It's a damn sad situation. That's what I think.
It really is, especially when we could be such a leader in this sort of thing, I feel like.
Well, exactly.
We have a relatively small population in terms of like geothermal and things like that. We're well placed, and solar arrays.
Oh, absolutely.
Given our climate and that.
But we're not doing anything with it. Obviously, it won't be the case in the future.
They'll be forced to take action at some point. But
it
would be nice if it wasn't at the very last minute.
Yes, exactly. It would be.
Did you hear about the Tesla Model 3 having production issues?
Look, I did. Again, what you were kind of mentioning earlier about Elon Musk promising the world and delivering it, but not at a deadline.
Yes, he said he was going to have 1,600 out by this stage, and he's only got 260 out. But it's probably to be expected in such an early stage of the production. It seems like they've got some bottlenecks for certain components. Yeah,
they do. And look, honestly, I think you're right. I think it's to be expected. And from the article that we were reading, published to The Verge, titled Tesla is behind on Model 3 production by Sean O'Kane, published to The Verge on October 2nd, 2017. Tesla is actually still hitting a lot of its annual production, or so far it's hitting annual production high for its other two car models. So they're not actually really behind in any huge way as a company. It's just on this particular Model 3 they seem to be a bit behind. But Elon seems to think that by the end of the year they'll still hit some decent production numbers, and they'll still meet the annual goals that they were looking to meet. So it's not really a huge thing overall, I'd say.
Although they're still under their target of 50,000 for the first half of this year of total vehicles delivered.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, I guess.
Although one thing that did surprise me out of this article is that of the 26,000 vehicles that they have delivered so far, 11,000 of those, almost 12,000, were the Model X, and only 14,000 were the Model S, whereas I thought that the Model S was far more popular than the Model X. But it seems like they're almost at parity.
Yeah, I guess they are. I don't actually know which one's the deluxe model and which one's the...
No, well, the Model S is the fairly luxury sedan, but the Model X is more of a SUV style thing with the gull-wing doors.
Right, okay.
But the Model S has always sort of been favourably reviewed, and the Model X has had a lot of people poking fun of it and saying it's all right, it's not as good as the S, and it's probably not as good as the 3 either, but they still seem to be selling in decent numbers.
Okay, well, that's interesting, isn't it? who would Tesla's current customer base be, though? Because they're obviously richer people.
Yes, because they're all the fairly high end. It's like, what, 70, 80,000 for a Model S? I think somewhere similar for an X. It might be marginally cheaper. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting.
But that's still pretty high end for a vehicle. US dollars, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I do find it funny. I was actually thinking, because I've been thinking a lot about buying shares, and I think that a company that makes the news as much as Tesla does, which is a lot.
A ridiculous amount.
Considering the size of their company.
I don't know how Elon Musk finds time to actually do anything between all these media appearances.
Exactly, yeah. But considering the size of their company, I think they're going to do very well. Maybe I should invest in them.
Are they on the share market? They probably are.
I'm actually not sure.
I guess they'd have to be.
Yeah, so they trade on the NASDAQ.
Okay.
And they're at $1.55 a share.
That's not bad.
And so their IPO... No, they're not at $1.55 a share. Wow, I am very wrong, David. They are at $356 a share.
just a little bit out. What were you looking at?
They went up $1.55 yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, on Friday in last trading. So that's what I was talking about.
So what's their overall graph look like?
Well, basically, when they were first floated, they started at $19.20 a share.
Jeez, it's a pretty big increase.
So around 2013, they had some major success, and their share price went from $36 a share to $190 a share over the space of a year. Then, they've had some peaks, they've had some troughs, but overall they seem to be heading up.
Mm.
They've actually had a bit of a flat period. Since the end of 2013, they were 190, and then at the start of 2017, they're 180. So over the course of this year, they really bumped up.
Maybe because the Model 3 has finally entered production.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because they have been talking about that for probably 2 years now.
Yeah, they've kind of been going up and down a bit.
Hmm.
This whole Model 3 thing. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be an interesting company. I could probably only afford a couple of shares though. Good God. These American companies just trade at way higher share prices than their Australian counterparts. Like, probably the most expensive Australian shares would be $200 maybe.
You may not know this, but is that just purely through the number of shares that are offered?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe it's a bit more restricted for American companies, and then in Australia it's like hundreds of thousands or something.
You see, I don't actually understand how shares work in terms of the number of shares that are issued. One big thing that really confuses me is how is it that companies are able to offer more shares after they've already offered X amount? Is it decided that company has, X amount of shares, or are they able to offer more shares? Because surely if you're a company and you've offered the market 10,000 shares, do you then have to say what percentage of your company that makes up?
Maybe.
I just don't understand it. How does that side of things work?
Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. When are you going to get on the proper share investment strategy, Alex?
I don't know. I've been thinking about it a lot. My ASX share market portfolio is actually jumping. I've almost so it started in August, I think, and I've almost made 10% on my portfolio.
Nice.
Which is a pretty good rate of return, right?
Mainly off of what?
What I've been doing is I've been building what's called a watch list in the game. So it's a bunch of companies that seem to be short sold a lot. So they have a like if you look at their price chart, it'll go up down quite a bit. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you buy these companies, because generally speaking they're good quality companies, which means that people think that they're going to go up. But what happens is people tend to overbuy them. So they'll think, oh great, this company's doing really well. They're making really good profit. They've their assets are looking good, and whatever it is you measure companies on. And they'll overbuy them. So they'll say, great, I'm going to pay 50 cents a share. The next person says, oh, I'm going to pay 51 cents a share, and then 52, blah, blah, blah. And over the course of a few days, the share price might go up 10% or something like that. And then people think, well, okay, right, like this company is good, but they're not quite worth this price. So then people will start selling, and people who bought at 51 cents a share might say, oh my God, it's actually going down. The market's not ready for this company. I'm going to sell at 52 cents or 53 cents a share or something like that. And so you kind of get that spike upwards, and then you get the spike downwards. But then people say, well, okay, look, the company's been going for a few more weeks or something like that. Everything's looking good, and one of their competitors is looking really bad. So their price might jump up again. But then people will overbuy it. They'll buy, and then the market will decide, right, I don't want to pay this price anymore. The majority of people will say, I don't want to buy the shares at this price anymore. So then it'll drop down again. And then, and then you'll get the same thing, and then it might jump up again. So when you look at the graph, it's kind of spiked. And while the overall trend might be up, you'll get an up, down, up, down, up, down. And I've been trying to buy on those up, down trends. So that you buy when the share price is down, sell when it's up, and then you can buy again when it's down, and then sell when it's up again. And
you've actually been able to do that successfully?
Well, I mean, off $50,000, I'm at now 54,800. So,
nice.
Which is a really good rate of return if you think about it.
It is, yeah. So you say it's like over the course of a few days that it sort of has this trend happening?
Well, a really good example of this, if you look up on Google the share price of a company called Galaxy Res, or Galaxy Resources. And it's hard to even tell on a weekly basis how it's going, but if you look at the 5-day chart for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at the 5-day, you see how it's got those kind of upwards and downwards trends, but during the course of a day, you actually get a lot bigger variation in this particular company, because what's happened is, I think China has shut down its lithium mines. So the Australian lithium mining companies, which are Galaxy, and there's another one called Oricobra, I think it's called. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But basically they've all skyrocketed because lithium is not a very common resource and very commonly used in phones and batteries, obviously.
Yes.
And because these Chinese companies are no longer, producing this lithium, the value of this particular Galaxy company is going up, and probably will continue to go up because they've now got a larger portion of the market. And what happens on a daily basis with this Galaxy Res? Can you see the 1-day chart there?
Yep.
You see how it's gone from $3.10 down to $3.03, and then it's gone up to $3.20. And then it kind of goes down again to like $3.08, and then it stabilizes about $3.11, which is basically where it started. But over the course of the day, you get a variation of like 5% in the share price. So if you buy at the right times, you can potentially make a few $100s a day on just one company. And the way the share market game works is if you have to split your investment, so you have to at least hold, the maximum you can hold in one company is 25% of your portfolio value. So if I hold, say, $12,000 in Galaxy Resources, I can make, potentially $400 a day by buying and selling at the right time.
You must have to really watch it, though, if it's varying to this degree, like over the course of a couple of hours.
Well, it's actually not that difficult to do, because what you do is, if Galaxy Res is down a few percent, like say if Galaxy Res is down 3%, I know that by about 12 o'clock, it's going to be up about 2% from down 3%. So it's going to have a variation of about 5% of its share price. So what you do is you buy it in the morning at that price. You set a sell price of, say I bought it at $3.10. I might set a sell price of $3.15.
What does that mean? It automatically sells at that point?
It automatically sells at that price. So if there are offers coming onto the market, you're trying to grab those offers.
Okay.
And the system will automatically buy them for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically how short trading is done. And you've just got to pick the right companies to do it with, though. Like, you wouldn't short trade with a bad company. Because if a company is going down, and generally their share price is going down, like if you look at the share price of Galaxy Res, the general trend since the lithium mines closed down in in China, which I think was approximately August or something like that, been going up. It's been going up, going down, going up, going down. But generally speaking, the overall trend is upwards.
If you look at the 5-year trend for this Galaxy company, like they're almost back up to their very start price.
Exactly, yeah.
And they went for like 2 years that it was like next to nothing.
But if you look at the max, they're actually at $10.95 back in 2009-ish.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
So obviously something hit them pretty hard. Wow, they're at 12 cents at one point. But obviously people think that they're positioned to take advantage of the gap that currently sits in the market. I don't know what that is, but yeah.
It's certainly on the upward trend again.
Well, they seem to be, don't they? Basically, if you look at most Australian miners, though, the Australian miners are having a really good time of it at the moment. Because, and I got this from an article that, or from advice rather, that had been written by Goldman Sachs, I think. And what they said is, at the moment, everyone in the share market should have some exposure to the Australian mining industry. Because, generally speaking, the Australian miners are quite cash and asset rich. They don't, for the good Australian miners, they don't have a huge amount of debt, and currently there are a lot of places that are looking for the natural resources that Australia produces. So things like steel, coal, gas, and obviously lithium to a smaller extent are pretty heavily in demand, especially in China, where there's a lot of infrastructure still taking place, obviously, as always. And in America as well. So if you look at another company called Whitehaven Coal...
I've heard of them.
Yeah, well, probably not for the best reasons. If you check out their share price, basically since the 2016-ish, they've just been going up and up and up and up and up. And especially since I started playing the game, I started this particular round of the game, which was August this year, they've basically been on a fairly meteoric rise. But this is another company that you can kind of short sell a bit. Because they're a good quality company, exactly the same thing happens to them that happens to Galaxy. They go up, they get overbought a bit, so they go down, but then the market decides they're still worth more, so they keep going up.
Do you know why that the lithium mines in China have been closed down?
I actually have no idea, to be honest.
It's interesting.
I think they were government owned, so obviously the government's decided they don't want to keep producing them. Obviously, you think that lithium will still be quite valuable because all the batteries we still produce are lithium, so I don't know why they would stop producing it.
Yeah.
My understanding is as well that there aren't many places in the world that you can mine lithium from.
It's probably true.
Although perhaps their mines have just run out.
Yeah, maybe.
If you look at the ASX in general, and you look at the general movement of it, I think you go ASX 200 graph or something, that should show it to you. You'll see that it's really gone down recently. Or it kind of hasn't really moved recently, but it had a fair bit of a dip when the US Federal Reserve decided it was going to start easing its quantitative measures and stop injecting money into the markets.
Okay.
And since then it's kind of not really been moving. But like if you look at the 1 year chart, overall shares have actually been going down since the start of 2017, or it's just really been like super flat.
Yeah.
And if you look at share markets all over the world, like international shares are still doing pretty well. And the US share market keeps hitting new highs, but the Australian share market just isn't moving. Couldn't really say what it means exactly, but that's the situation we sit in now, and we're definitely not at a high, because the highest the share market was just before we had the huge GFC back in 2008.
Is there any markets around the world that are going particularly well?
The US markets are hitting new highs every day. I don't actually really know anything about any of the other markets, but I know that the European markets are still going up. I don't know if they're the highest they've ever been, but UK share market. I don't even know what the UK share market's called.
No.
And Yep, the London Stock Exchange is at its highest, way above where it's ever been.
That's interesting.
So basically, markets all over the world are going up, apart from Australia's share market. But overall, there's a lot of debt, and especially with the US, there's a lot of government money being pumped into the market, which probably shouldn't really be going in there. And it's just made for a lot of speculation. Can I share my personal conspiracy theory with you?
Sure.
Well, it's not even really a conspiracy theory. It's my doomsday theory. Well, it's not really doomsday, but I think that there's definitely going to be another crash, and probably not in too long as well.
Based on what? What would cause a crash?
Well, there's a lot of debt. There's a lot of government debt currently sitting with, especially in the US, that's basically has to be unwound. And government debt is good for the economy. So when the government's putting out bonds and when the government's kind of loaning lots of money, especially at really low interest rates as the interest rates are now, it's really easy to get money out of the government. So basically what you can do is you can loan, you can buy government bonds at 2%, and then you can put those into the stock market. And then if the stock market's making 5%, you just get a free 3% just by investing in some kind of managed fund or something like that. So basically that's what a lot of large companies are doing. They're getting money out of the government and then investing that money into the market themselves, and then they're just getting free money out of that. So that's basically what they're doing. But when the government starts taking those away and starts issuing less, they become more valuable because people say, right, I can still make 5% on the stock market, but if this person's going to pay 2% for these bonds, I'll pay 3%. I'm still going to make 2%. And then someone else is going to come in and say, well, I'm going to pay 2.5%. So the interest rate on these bonds is going to start going up, and because they're going to start being more valuable because people can't get their hands on them. And B, the government's going to stop issuing quite as many, so there's not going to be quite as much money sitting in the market. So what's making these large companies or these large investment companies valuable is all the money that's being poured into them. They can have a lot of influence on the share market. They can buy and sell large companies. But when they stop getting that investment as well, their new money stops coming in. So their values start going down because they form part of the share market that they're investing in. They start to drop off, and then other companies start to drop off as well. It just becomes a big chain reaction.
Okay. I guess that kind of makes sense.
And for the Australian market as well, so ridiculously heavily invested in property, and the property market is just geared up so heavily based on really low interest rates, which is what we hold now. The government's kind of stepped in and put, I think, some pretty heavy restrictions on bank lending. The banks won't really be able to offer interest only anymore.
Okay.
And I don't know about the interest and principal percentage, but I think it would have to be different. Deposits have to be different as well. I think they're going to have to ask for larger deposits now, basically to stop people buying houses at huge prices and speculating against the fact that they're going to get large amount of capital growth out of it, especially in the major capital cities. I think because of that, once the Australian bank starts raising interest rates, which they have to at some point, people are going to have to start selling their properties because they can't afford the interest payments on them. And I don't know. I just don't think it'll be that good for the property market. I think that if the property market goes down, then the Australian share market would crash as well. Maybe that's doom and gloom, but
it surely can't. Even if it does go down, I don't think it'll be as bad as the GFC though. I don't know if there's enough in there to make that happen.
Well, no, probably not. And I think that we're aware of it at this point, and they're trying to tackle it right now.
That's one thing they seem to be somewhat proactive on.
Well, they're proactive on it now, but I mean, they've still kind of let it happen. The only reason we're in this situation is banks were offering so many interest-only loans, and with low initial deposits, that it allowed the property market in the major capital cities in Australia to spike so much.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
For no real good reason. Those are my crazy conspiracy theory not even conspiracy theory, doom and gloom predictions. They may not come true. In fact, they probably won't. I'm sure there are way more competent people than me managing the money markets in Australia, but that's what I think could happen.
When do you think it would happen by? 1, 2, 3, 5 years?
2020.
2020, okay.
Reasonable estimation.
So get out of the property market then.
I think, at least for now, the Australian property market would have had to have hit its peak. Because as I understand it, a big thing driving the property market is foreign investment, of course, and demand as well. Basically, people want to move to Sydney, people want to move to Melbourne. They're very desirable places to live in, and obviously, if you want to move there, you want to buy a house. So, that's a big thing. But I think a big portion, certainly what I noticed investing in Sydney, not investing rather, but like seeing property auctions in Sydney, which I did see a few of when I was the fact that all the investors in Sydney especially seem to be people coming from China and buying with money that they made in China. But as I understand it, the Chinese government has recently put some pretty hefty restrictions on moving money out of China to stop people doing exactly that, stop people making their money in China and then moving it out and then spending it in other countries.
Okay.
So, I'm sure there are still ways to do it. It's become a lot more difficult.
Okay, well, that could be good, I guess, in the long run.
And I think if you look at the Sydney property market, you'll find out that the average property price has dropped over the last 2 months.
It's still ridiculously expensive.
It is, and that's why I think it would have to go down.
Did you see Elon Musk also proposed a sort of point-to-point travel around the Earth using the BFR rocket?
I did. It makes sense to me.
From any point in the world to another point in the world in under 60 minutes was the claim. And most under 30?
Maybe.
Well, I would be all for this, right? Because I hate long-haul flights. But I assume it would be very expensive.
Yes, it would be. It would presumably be for the uber wealthy. But obviously there's a market for that. There's definitely a market for that.
I would say so, yeah.
If you look at a CEO who works in China and needs to get to America in a few hours, there you go. You've got it.
Got to spend money to make money.
Well, you do have to. Obviously one of the things for this to work is, though, you have to have a BFR in every country, though, right? It's part of it.
Well, you would need a few at least, right? It could go from one place to another place to another place, I suppose, because it is reusable. But yeah, you probably need one for every country. That probably makes sense, yeah? Yeah?
Yeah, well, why not?
It's not inconceivable.
Because it seems to me like, why would you need it unless it was an emergency thing? Because surely the pricing isn't even going to come close to a first-class flight.
Although, didn't Elon say something about have a cost per seat that is about the same as a full fare economy in an aircraft?
Oh, really? Did he?
Yeah.
Well, in that case.
I don't understand how that math works, but that's what he's claiming that it will become eventually.
Well, okay, but I wonder how far in the future that is.
But that would be fantastic. You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes with more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/25. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
I didn't say thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as
well. So was it a bank holiday or something last Monday?
It was a bank holiday. Yeah, well, we haven't...
Or is it Labor Day?
Labor Day. Well, Labor Day is a bank holiday, right? Or are they different things?
Well, we don't really use that terminology in Victoria, though, bank holidays, that much. I know you have
Oh,
one
okay.
proper bank holiday where it's literally just for bank employees or financial
Oh,
institutions.
right. Yeah, no, you're right, actually. We do have one of those.
But then, yeah, I think I've heard people call your Labor Day both just Labor Day and a bank holiday, so maybe it is sort of the same thing as well, but it applies to everyone, so I don't know. Maybe it started like that.
Yeah, well, my idea of a bank holiday is any holiday in which a bank participates.
But that's all the public holidays, and then also their own ones, which only New South Wales have, so...
Well, that's interesting, actually, because, you know, we have the New South Wales Public Holiday Day in my company, and I think we get that because bank employees get holidays that we don't.
Yeah, just strange, but as long as you
It's
get
a bit
it.
weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know where I want my next holiday to be? I figured it out.
Italy.
I want to go... No, not Italy.
Machu
in Australia.
Picchu.
No, not Machu Picchu. Sure, you'll never guess it. Well, maybe you would, but I would have never guessed it.
Daintree Rainforest.
Nope.
Perth.
Close. Well, closer than the Daintree Rainforest.
Uluru.
Nope.
It's closer to Perth. There's nothing close to Perth except Perth.
Well, that's what you think. There's a place called the Ningaloo Reef.
Never heard of it.
Apparently, it's the best conditioned reef in Australia. And selfishly enough, I'd like to visit it before it dies, like all the other reefs are doing.
Is it under threat?
Well,
doing
all
better
of
'cause it's
Australia's
on-
reefs. Yeah, I think it's on the better side,
Yeah.
so it hasn't been bleached. But apparently, like a good percentage of the Great Barrier Reef has been bleached and is now dead. And it was also destroyed by the storm that hit there a little while ago too.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. So basically, that's my plan. You can go there and you can swim with whale sharks, and obviously dive the reef. And I've got my open water diving certificate, so I can scuba dive.
I probably did tell me that at some point, but I had forgotten.
Yeah, but that's what I want to do.
How much scuba diving have you done?
Oh no, I just did the open water, so 5 dives, I think.
Okay.
And I've forgotten everything, but
When was that?
you can do like refresher courses. When I was over in Asia, I did it in Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
But it's like I think there are 2 main
Does that apply
diving
everywhere?
qualifications. Yeah, it does. So you can do a paddy dive, or the company I did it with, which is like, what's it called, SSB or something like that. And that was the company I did it with. But there are 2 kind of main schools of diving, I guess, and that was one of them. So yeah, it's internationally recognised. You can dive anywhere. And I did it with an English company, so
Okay.
yeah. The main guy who did it was drunk when he took me diving. But I don't like to let that take away from the fact that I still got my open water.
Well, if anything, that probably makes you more fit for the job without a proper instructor, right?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, so there were 2 kind of learner instructors there. And this guy was on his way out, so he was basically passing the school over to them. So they kind of taught us most of the stuff, actually. And he was just there to watch. But I did it over New Year's Eve, and he went out over New Year's Eve. And yeah, I remember on that last day that we were diving, especially, he did this thing called a James Bond roll entry into the water, and he basically did a backwards flip off the boat. Which was hilarious.
Just to show you the best and safest way to enter the water.
Yeah, essentially. No, sorry, it wasn't a backwards flip, it was a forwards flip. Because usually you fall off backwards onto your tanks.
Yes.
So that they cushion the fall. But he did a forwards flip, so you still fall onto your tank, but you fall onto your tank after flipping forwards.
Okay. That would have been quite spectacular.
There's actually a picture of me doing it on Facebook. Well, I mean, obviously all you can see is my butt, but
Yes.
yeah. So that was my diving experience. I wouldn't really say that I'd necessarily be confident to go diving alone on my first go, but I know that you can do refresher courses, and I'll probably do one of those.
Yeah, probably sensible.
I remember the basics, breathe, but not water, air.
Yes.
Go under the water.
How far down did you go?
I think my deepest dive was 9 meters.
Okay.
So
Not too far down.
No, wait, was it 9 meters? Open water is 2. I actually have a logbook. I could check the depth of my dive. It's either 9 or 19 meters.
Something ending with 9.
Yeah. I actually have the feeling it may have been 19 meters. But yeah, it's amazing diving because, it's another world underwater.
It is, yeah.
And I was diving in a really crappy location too, so I couldn't actually see a whole lot of anything. But I know that if you go diving in the nicer spots, it's absolutely sensational. That's something I want to do.
So that's your end of the year trip then?
Look, I'd like it to be, but I mean, gosh, I spent a lot of money in the Hunter Valley. So I need to save.
On what?
Wine, David. What else? What else would you buy in the Hunter Valley?
But surely it's cheaper when it's, right next to all where it's produced. You can just get it straight out of the vat.
Look, I mean, it's cheaper, but it's also not cheaper if you're buying expensive wines and impulsively deciding to start a cellar.
Oh, okay.
Not that I know anyone who's done that.
Well, maybe it'll age to perfection and you can sell it on for a profit later on if you lose interest in the whole thing.
That's the idea, starting a cellar and,
I thought it was mainly so you could, crack one open when you have moments to celebrate years into the future.
Well, I've actually started drinking a bit of red wine now because Samantha likes red wine, and nice red wine is nice. So, well, I think we've had this discussion actually, haven't we?
Probably.
So, I thought of it as sort of an investment, if you know what I mean. Because I'm going to be buying the wine anyway. I might as well buy it there and buy it cheap.
What was the most expensive bottle that you bought?
Well, it was an $80 bottle of Shiraz.
Oh, that's not crazy.
No, it wasn't.